What is going on, good people? Welcome to the very first episode of E-Up. This is your host, Zach Taylor. Welcome, man. That was one of my favorite old school tracks by Pete Rock and CL Smooth. They reminisce over you, man. Shout out to them guys, man. Money earned in Mount Vernon, my old hometown. Do not own any rights to that music, of course. Man, what a journey we have been on. I'm so excited to finally get this channel going. I know some of you are excited as well. It's been a long time coming. And with that being said, let me give a quick shout out to my very first subscriber. I actually had this subscriber when I wasn't actually uploading content. Very big supporter of mine, good friend of mine I met at Mark University. Actually someone who transitioned on to the spiritual realm. He passed away 2 months ago, the same day as my grandmother's birthday. Jeremy Spencer, shout out to him, and like I said, great friend and supporter in all my efforts and what I wanted to do in life. And he definitely has improved my life, just from his character and the way he speaks. So he once told me, go out on a limb, because that's where the fruit is. So that's part of what this is, right? So shout out to Jeremy, man. Much love. Ashe. Before I get started with today's topic, I do want to give you all a bit of a background. I know some of you got to see the intro or trailer to the channels to get a bit more background about why I started E-Up in this channel. I would also wanted to give you some background about my education and professional background as well. So I've been doing public speaking for since I was 12 years old, so quite a while. Almost 14 15 years, being involved in the church and the ministry, as well as just teaching the youth, right, whether it be at Vacation Bible School, at elementary schools. My dad has also been a school teacher, so I've had many opportunities to speak in front of big crowds, small crowds, and that's just mine. This is just one of the things that I've naturally been good at, and has always been a pillar of my life that I realized that was very impactful. So I wanted to make that a business venture, not necessarily for the monetary aspect, but mainly for the purpose of serving God. So also, getting back to my educational background, I went to Indiana State University as well as Martin. Spent the first 2 years at Indiana State, then transferred to Martin. So I completed 4 years studying business management with a focus in marketing. I did 6 years of management working at UPS in Indianapolis, and then also was a former CFO of a music management group, which didn't sustain for too long. One, for relational issues, as well as there was a death in the family of the music group. So that took a big toll on everyone, and we just never got revamped. I've also studied African history and spirituality over the past 5 years, and still continue to do so to this day. Read and studied the works of many, such as Dr. Kaba Kamene and Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, and Anthony T. Browder, just to name a few. So shout out to those guys. Ashe Otep. And also, I'm licensed in the Department of Insurance, so I will have some educational videos on finance and financial literacy, even though you don't need to be licensed to really educate people on those things, but I do have the authorization to teach certain things, as well as I'm building a brokerage, right? So I'm definitely always looking to educate people on financial literacy and ways to maximize their money. Last couple of things before I get into it, I've also been taught up under many doctors and professionals within the areas of psychology as well as cultural awareness. And then I've also been a business coach to many of people in the finance industry, and spent time sports training and coaching for basketball. I played basketball in high school, helped my high school coach out a few times, and I've been training a few youth here in Missouri. So just a bit of my background to give you guys some credentials, or I guess accreditation for me being able to give you this knowledge. But at the end of the day, I am a scholar, right? I heavily research what I share with you all, and if any of you find any fault, any error, please feel free to let me know. But we don't condone any negative um, peer review, right? None of that stuff. I don't look to purposefully miseducate, and if you find that I have been miseducating, please let me know. Educate me, right? Enlighten me, right? But also uplift, right? Hence the name of the brand. So without further ado, let's get started with today's topic. As you guys see, we're talking about the psychological development of kids, right? Now, I chose this topic first because my heart yearns for the youth, right? Yearns for the youth and the next generation to be enabled to be the best versions of themselves, to be equipped with the knowledge that me and my peers did not have, the knowledge, the wisdom, the not accessories, but the resources, right? The goal is to free the mind. The mind is like your control center that dictates how you behave and ultimately the lifestyle that you'll obtain. But what isn't often talked about in schools as well as homes where we're building these relationships and new marriages and families is what the mind consumes, right? We're not talking about what is being put in the mind of a child, right? Not just from what they learn directly being in school, being raised at home, but also on the subconscious level, what the spirit and the mind, what the spirit, the body, and the mind, what they consume on a daily basis from their surroundings and environments. And that's what I want to touch on today, right? Is things that can affect the psychological development of a child, right? And I have two excerpts, two resources in which, giving you all this information. The first is the impact of economic hardship on Black families and children, psychological distress, parenting, and socio-emotional development. This was published in April of 1990 by Bonnie McLeod. And then the second piece is from a survey, the 1958 National Child Development Survey and 1970 British Cohort Study. This is an intelligence in childhood and the risk of psychological distress in adulthood. So I'll be covering basically various aspects and variables that could dictate or not, I don't want to say dictate, but definitely have an impact on the psychological development of a child. And basically breaking down into three components: environment, family, and then inner self. How do they internalize everything that is going on around them? And with time already running close to 9 minutes, I don't want my videos to be longer than 13, 14 minutes long. Probably will have a second part to continue this section before we jump into the next topic on the second episode. Sorry. So coming from the impact of economic hardship on Black families and children, the first point that Bonnie points out is poverty and economic loss, right? These things diminish capacity for supportive, consistent, and involved parenting, right? Again, poverty and economic loss diminish capacity for supportive, consistent, and involved parenting, making them vulnerable to negative events, right? So just again, this is kind of common, right? But it explained in a very complex way, right? So many of us are familiar with these poverty and economic hardships, these losses that don't allow families, mothers or fathers, to necessarily be super involved with their child's development in the early stages, especially while they're in school, right? Because they're trying to make ends meet. They're trying to make up for so much that they don't have within the community. Second is psychological distress deriving from negative events, chronic conditions, and lack of marital bonds, right? So again, going back to the events that happen within the community, drug, crime, like I used to live in Harlem, and almost every parade we had, during Black History Month would be ended abruptly by people wanting to put shots up in the air, right? So that can have an impact on people and how they see environments, because again, we only know what we see and what we're around. So this doesn't allow a child to basically to have the ability to envision another environment not like what they know, right? And then of course the lack of marital bonds, right? So just that lack of togetherness and unity between a man and a woman who have created a child, it's not as strong as those who are on one accord, who do see eye to eye on many of things when it comes to raising the child, or even just how they do things financially. These things matter, and they definitely impact the development of a child. We don't see it all the time, but it is definitely happening. Moving on, the parent's behavior to the child, right? We oftentimes as parents, now I don't have any kids, and I hope that a lot of what I'm saying here and teaching, for those that don't have kids, you can kind of take an extra step ahead to making sure that you do provide the best environment, family, as well as situations, so that they can have the best inner self moments, to be able to give the best psychological development for your child. But oftentimes people who do have children, parents don't like to think that they're raising their child wrong, especially if you're raising your first child. You're going off of what you know, and of course how you raise a second, third, and fourth child may be a lot better than how you raised the first. But that is very critical, right? How much do you yell at your child? How much do you discipline your child? How do you discipline your child? How do you talk to your child? Do you uplift your child versus condemning them? Like, the way you interact with your child does have an impact of not only on how they perceive you and how you feel about them, but how they can communicate with others. The parent, especially the mother, is the first teacher. So if the children feel like they don't have a solid relationship with the parents, then it make them very difficult to want to bond with anyone else. Next, going on to father and child relations. During economic hardship and stress between the mother and father are heavily dependent on that father-child relationship. So again, I'll read that point again, because I know my words were kind of all over the place. Father-child relations during economic hardship are heavily dependent on the relationship between the mother and father. So what this is illustrating is what the relationship between maybe a son and his dad is like, based on the relationship between the mother and father. If maybe the father is not making enough money, or whatever the case may be, isn't working a job, maybe he's out of a job, going through certain stuff, maybe he just got out of jail, maybe he for whatever reason, right, is just going through it financially and economically, and cannot provide the way she would like to, or they just don't see eye to eye emotionally or spiritually. Now that doesn't allow the father to build a relationship with his son that is really needed. A child, especially a son, is always yearning for a relationship with his father. Nothing materially really matters. It's always the relationship that's there. And then the last point I'll make here, as I conclude this episode, is the intelligence in childhood and risk and psychological distress. Now we basically have just covered environment and family, right? What are the conditions like within the community that the child lives in? What are they like at home? As well as what is the makeup of the family? Are the parents married? Are they not married? Do they have their finances together? Do they not have them together? And what do their work-life relations have to do with how much time and energy they can give to the child? Next week, on the continuation and at the first part of episode 2, we will talk about the inner self of the child, and how the different mental aspects in terms of the IQ and what they have access to in terms of the community and material things that have impact on their psychological development. Thank you all for watching this video. Hopefully you've been enlightened, if not become more aware of how serious certain things are when it comes to your child's development. This is not just in the early years, even as a teenager, but this can still permeate through a child's way of life, even as an adult, even as a young adult in their early 20s, because again, they're still really figuring out life and just springing from being raised in a household 24/7 up under their parents. So they still work under the operation of being a child in a sense. So again, I hope that you all enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Share the video for those who you feel need to see this. And I can't wait to see you all next week for episode 2 for the continuation of psychological development of kids. And then we will cover You Can Have My Light. That is a bit of a self self-help motivational speech for you all next week. Peace, love, and happiness. That is it for today's lesson. Ashe and Otep.